How do you see banking changing over the next few years in particular? Like, is there something really that stands out to you, or is it one of those things where you don't know, all you know is that you need to increase engagement and you need to increase, the app for the customer, so to speak?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I think we have a view. It doesn't mean our view is right. I think we have a view of what the future looks like. We're very, very excited at the moment about some of the new things that we're going to announce soon. Like, we haven't, so I don't want to jump the gun, but we think that we've identified some areas of banking that have been very well underserviced. And there's an opportunity for us to change the way people think about it, right? I think we're already on that journey and we're already sort of doing that. So I can see banking changing to be more service-based rather than product-based. That's an obvious one. And we've seen that, to take Apple, for example, you see that happening right now. We're sort of migrating from just being a hardware company to being a services company. I think we see something similar happening in banking. We also see that people don't necessarily want to engage with a financial service. So the way I explain it to people is, nobody ever asked me for banking. Nobody ever comes up to me and say, hey, can you help me bank? Or can you do my banking better? Like, that's not a question people ask. The question people ask is, wow, how do I invest my money? Or how do I save my money? Or how do I find out more about what I'm spending? Or how do I change my habits? Or imagine if my behaviour was blah. So, for example, we get a lot of people, obviously it's been the most popular book in Australia for the last few years, so we get a lot of people asking us about the Barefoot Investor and saying, hey, when are you going to launch another account? Because with Up I can have a transactional account and I can have heaps of savers. That's great. When are you going to have another transactional account? We think we might have cracked the nut there for people, that they're asking the wrong question. The question they should be asking is, how do I segregate my money? How do I identify my spend? How do I create more discipline in my spending behaviour? Not how do I get another piece of plastic?
Yeah.
And so people are sort of conditioned to ask those questions of their bank. Hey, I'm going to buy a house, right, I need a mortgage.
Because it's how you currently solve X problem.
So the best example people give, I think, is nobody ever asked for an iPad. And yet nobody ever asked for a touch phone with the iPhone, but they became the fastest selling consumer goods in history.
Yeah.
And so nobody's going to ever ask for what a bank could be for the future. And so a lot of the rhetoric we get from neobanks and digital banks all over the world is basically ask your customer. Customers will tell you what they want. Actually, customers are part of the equation. Customers need to be completely centric to what it is you do, and you need to service the customer, engage with the customer, and deliver the best value you can for the customer. It doesn't mean that the customer knows what the future of banking is.
Yeah, it's so funny. That is like the cliche line from neobanks at the moment, and it just makes me think, well, neobanks are just basically banks that have lots of software developers instead of business bankers.
Yeah.
So it's a very valid point. And you mentioned before about Apple Pay. I think to highlight the impact of what you guys could potentially be doing is, there's a video on YouTube, and it came out very recently. It was how Apple took over Japan, and it was in relation to Apple Pay and the Suica card, because I go to Japan a lot for jobs. I like going there. We were planning on getting married there, but that increasingly is logistically becoming a nightmare. However, it really, that video, people have to go watch it. We'll put in the links because it really highlights how the phone is now becoming, that mobile first approach is really, I can see in 5 years from now, no one will really carry a wallet, even for IDs and whatnot. I can really see that becoming the new normal. And you can see that in Japan in that video.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see whether or not, how far down the path we go. So, for example, not carrying a wallet is one thing. Another thing is people living their lives by subscription. At the moment,
Kevin Kelly talks about that a lot.
Yeah, like you get pretty grumpy when you have to pay fees for things, but you're happy to subscribe to a service that delivers value.
Yeah, particularly when you just put your thumb on it. And
that's it.
Yeah.
So I think the way we're consuming things digitally is that, if you think about this, that in the past, if you like Back to the Future, you probably like the original and not the other sequels, but if you look at, say, Back to the Future 3, they go back to 1887, right? And is it 1887? Or I think it is. Might even be earlier. But anyway, they go back to a time of ye old, and you walk into the Wells Fargo branch, and the only difference is that instead of a pen, they have a quill. but they still have the bars on the window, and instead of coins, they're using gold or whatever, like gold bullion or whatever it is. But actually, nothing's changed in banking. So now we still have those branches and we still have those forms, and all we did was take those forms and put them on the internet. And instead of using a quill, we moved to a pen that was on a chain, and then we moved it from a pen on a chain to a form on the internet that you type it in, but it's still a form. For us, it's like, how do you take the next step where you actually digitize the interaction that you have with your money, and you digitize the interactions that you have beyond just taking that same approach to banking.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit sort of philosophical, but it's
important.
It's very important. And then having a technology mindset. And for me, I just want to add this. When I say technology-led, a lot of people get confused and think it's a bunch of engineers or software developers or whatever, right? And that's fine, but actually it's not. Well, like, technology-led is Uber are disrupting taxis. Largest taxi company in the world, not a taxi company, software company. Skype is the largest telecommunications company in the world, but not a telecommunications company. They're a technology company. Amazon's the largest retailer in the world, but they're not a retailer. They're just a technology company. So if you look at those type of companies that have had a material impact on a particular industry and completely disrupted it, they're technology companies taking a technology mindset. And the technology mindset encompasses design, user experience, design thinking, user experience, customer centricity, engagement, engineering, security, all of those, user experience, all those sort of things that encompass a company that is focused solely on delivering the best customer outcome. So for me, that's the disruption that'll happen in banking. And I don't know where it'll end. I don't know, it's hard to predict. I don't have a crystal ball, but what I do know is that as a technology company, Ferocia is able to, through partnering with Bendigo, obviously, and Bendigo exceptionally brave to partner with a technology company like Ferocia to try and help drive this change and try and lead this change. So I can't say where it will end, but I can say that we're on the journey right now. And I think that journey is about design, it's about customers, it's about experience, it's about engagement, and it's about services. What it's not about is financial products.
Yeah. Look, this has been very interesting. We do need to jump into some rapid fire questions. You can see I've got pages and pages of notes. There's all sorts of things that I've missed here, and someone's going to...
I don't mind if we go over either.
Someone's going to crack the shits at me. But one thing I've been thinking about, I'm going to say I do like your approach to comms and PR. Like, just don't tell people what's happening is the best way to go about it, because then they're not disappointed. And you see that with so many neobanks where they're saying, we've got this thing coming out, and it's still coming out, and it's still coming out. Don't worry, it's definitely coming out. Which I quite like. The 24/7 support's really interesting. And now I fundamentally understand where you're going, because there's so many services that I want, but I realise that, I'm nearly 30, there's things that you're going to put in there, like before I'll, ever get my mortgage capabilities or credit card with rewards points and blah, blah, blah. So a lot of this makes a whole lot more sense. I guess I'm intrigued as to how do you see things like blockchain and cryptocurrency fitting into this sort of stuff, the future of neobanking at least?
Yeah, so just on that point about talking about things before they happen, we tend to talk about things after we've released them, right? Yeah. Obviously.
Yes.
So we publish the Tree of Up so you know what's coming, so that we're accountable, but then we won't make a fuss about it until we actually deliver it. So I think that's really important. It's just a subtle point, but I think it is really important.
Yeah.
So in terms of crypto and that sort of stuff, to me, like I had there was a breakfast with Jack Dorsey, founder and CEO of Square, and just recently in Melbourne, and it was just awesome because he's a huge sort of Bitcoin advocate, and a lot of people Bitcoin this or blockchain that or whatever. But what he was talking about was that it actually takes, I guess, a collective effort, a concerted effort to make these things successful, and a huge company like Square actually taking a particular view on that in the market will make it happen. Like, things don't happen by accident. So they happen because someone champions them and brings them to market. Elon Musk, electric cars. Everyone asks him the question now, what do you think about all these new competing electric cars? He doesn't think anything about them because his business plan was to increase the advent of electric cars. Increase the adoption. So for him, all these traditional companies building electric cars, that's great.
Yeah.
So I feel like the same thing with blockchain and Bitcoin and any crypto at all is that there's a whole bunch of innovative early adopters, early players. As that sort of continues to build momentum and everything and become the norm, then we'll see the banks adopting it. Like right now, for a lot of the banks, it's very risky, it's very different, it's very strange and everything. But I think that what we'll see is that it sort of has a natural, so there'll be those early adopters, and then there'll be a natural sort of time when it sort of crosses the chasm, and it just starts to become the norm. To me, I also think about it very differently. So if I think about just blockchain in general, I think about it like a distributed database.
Yeah.
Like rather than powering necessarily a financial service.
Yeah.
And obviously Bitcoin is the thing that made it sort of famous, and so people immediately associate it with a financial service, and so we get that question a lot. But actually, if you think about it as distributed ledger for money, or if you think about it as distributed database for data, what are the use cases that we could have that would be powered by that capability in the future? And all over the world, we're seeing thousands and thousands of projects, both in financial services and outside of financial services, adopting these technologies. So for me, again, I don't really have the answer, but I think it is part of the puzzle. It's part of this no single company or person controlling things, and for them to be distributed is a logical way to go.
Yeah.
Having a sort of finite value of something so that it can be distributed fairly is another really interesting concept. So I don't have the answer, but I know that it's part of the journey.
Yeah, and it is very interesting because it's really an argument between, do you want your monetary policy to be distributed or do you want it to be centralized? That's fundamentally what all of this comes down to. There's also a lot of people speculate on whether is it an asset class, is it its own thing. I think it's a mechanism more than it is a new type. It's both a new type of asset and a technology. It's interesting. I wonder whether in future when we have Up bank accounts, whether you'll primarily be getting paid in Bitcoin or you'll be primarily getting paid in Aussie coin or something like that, because the RBA has floated the idea of creating their own digital currency, but most of the banking system is digital anyway.
Canada have already done it, and so and other places too. So it's possible that could happen. I think the way that we would think about it at the moment anyway is that we would just want to be able to support that. So from our perspective, we might not necessarily be the drivers of the adoption of that. We might for certain things, but for us, we have this thing we call roam free, so you could sort of be able to travel the world sort of fee free and not have to think about your banking and financial services. And we want to do similar things here in Australia. So if you can think about the conversion of different currencies and think about making money transfers and think about all the different things that you do, to me, we should liken digital currencies to the existing ones. So whether it be US dollar or Great British pounds or Japanese yen, it could also be Bitcoin or Ethereum or any others, Aussie coin, whatever it might be. And they should be interoperable. It should be, if I'm exchanging my digital currency for fiat, it should actually, the on-ramp to be able to do that, and then the exchange of them should be seamless. And, we've obviously seen some innovation in that space here in Australia and overseas. And I just think that to me is logical, but it's almost a little bit ahead of its time, because in order for anything to be adopted in the banking space, highly regulated, a lot of incumbent players and all that sort of stuff, it needs broad adoption. So at the moment, the thing we're sort of talking about, off topic, but the thing we've been talking about is open banking. So everyone asks me all the time, when's open banking going to happen? What are your views and all this stuff?
It's on GitHub.
Right, it's available now. If you log into GitHub, you can see the standards. But who's going to implement it, and then what customers are going to be able to take advantage of their consumer data rights? That's going to 85% of the Australian population bank with the big four banks. So my answer is, when the big four banks adopt the consumer data rights as a standard, and when they implement it in a satisfactory way that delivers a great customer experience, then that is when it'll be implemented. Not when 100 different startups do it, because those 100 different startups collectively probably represent 1% of the market. So they can be a catalyst for change, but actually we need the big players to adopt that new legislation and implement it in a really meaningful way for open banking to be anything in Australia.